There's a particular kind of medieval knowledge that feels almost unfair. Techniques so effective, so simple, and so deeply rooted in observation that they outperform modern solutions without the need for machines or chemicals. Today, we're diving into one of those techniques, a forgotten method used to keep homes warmer long before insulation, vapor barriers, or engineered lumber existed. And before we get into it, subscribe to In the Beginning, so you don't miss any of the old-world building intelligence that shaped how our ancestors survived brutal winters with nothing but raw materials and keen understanding. Because the treatment we're about to explore wasn't decorative, wasn't ceremonial, and wasn't rare. It was practical alchemy. It turned ordinary timber into a barrier against cold, moisture, and wind at a time when failing to do so could cost lives. The medieval approach to cold-proofing wood begins with acknowledging how their buildings were constructed. Timber was the skeleton of nearly every structure, from small farmhouses to early guild halls. But wood is porous. It breathes, it expands, it absorbs moisture, and in cold climates it becomes a pathway for heat loss. Medieval builders understood that untreated wood allows drafts to slip through, and once a beam becomes saturated, it freezes, making the entire wall colder. To prevent this, they developed a treatment that combined heat, resin, soot, and oil, forming a protective layer that sealed pores, repelled moisture, and stabilized the timber against temperature swings. The first step in the old method was the controlled charring of wood. Not burning it into charcoal, but toasting the outer surface until it developed a thin carbon layer. This technique appears in Viking settlements, alpine villages, and medieval Eastern Europe. The charred layer served as a thermal barrier, slowing heat transfer and resisting moisture penetration. When you examine preserved wooden beams from medieval barns or bridges, you often find this darkened shell still intact centuries later. Controlled charring also hardened the surface, making it resistant to insects and fungi that thrive in damp wood. But charring alone wasn't what repelled cold. It was the base that allowed the next materials to bind securely. After preparing the surface, builders applied what can only be described as medieval wood armour, a mixture of pine resin, tallow, and soot. Resin provided waterproofing and flexibility. Tallow, rendered from animal fat, added density and freeze resistance. Soot acted as a binder and deep penetrating sealant. When heated together, this mixture became a viscous black balm that soaked into the charred grain, filling micro-cracks and creating a thermal seal. As it cooled, it stiffened, similar to modern wax coatings, but far more durable. In cold weather, instead of becoming brittle, the mixture contracted evenly, preventing the cracking that typically occurs with oils or paints exposed to freezing temperatures. This treatment wasn't just for decorative beams. Builders used it on door frames, roof boards, exposed supports, and even wooden floors in colder regions. Anywhere cold air could creep into a building, this mixture was applied. Some medieval texts even mention alternating layers of charring and resin coating on buildings constructed in mountainous passes. This layering created a multi-stage defense. Char repelled moisture, resin blocked wind, tallow stabilized the finish, and soot added a low-friction, weather-resistant surface. Together, the result was wood that remained warm to the touch even in freezing weather. Modern historians studying medieval climate adaptations often point to this as one of the reasons certain early European settlements endured winters that wiped out neighbouring communities. To understand why this technique works, it helps to consider the physics behind it. Wood loses heat through conduction and moisture exchange. When the porous structure absorbs water, even humidity from the air, that moisture conducts cold inward and radiates it into the interior of a building. The char-resin-soot method effectively closes the wood's pores, replacing water pathways with fats, oils and carbon. The carbon layer is naturally resistant to thermal transfer. Resin locks the surface against new moisture. Tallow prevents brittleness in freezing conditions. It is a combination that responds to temperature changes with remarkable stability. Medieval builders didn't have thermodynamic charts, but they had centuries of observation. They knew what materials resisted rot, what kept walls warmer, and what lasted through generations. The method is surprisingly quite easy to use today for anyone experimenting with traditional building or, off-grid shelters. You start by taking a wooden beam or board and lightly scorching the exterior with a torch or controlled flame. The goal isn't to blacken it deeply, but rather to create a thin char layer that you can still touch without leaving residue. Once the surface cools, you'll want to prepare the mixture. Melt natural pine resin in a metal pot, add rendered tallow slowly, and stir until it's blended. Then add fine soot from hardwood ash or a clean chimney sauce until the mixture thickens to a spreadable, tar-like consistency. Apply it with a cloth or brush while it's warm so it seeps into the char. Let it cool naturally. And for heavier sealing, just repeat a second coat. In practical application, this is ideal for small cabins, sheds, tool handles, fence posts, or honestly any wooden structure exposed to cold and moisture. A cabin wall treated this way will shed rain, resist snowmelt, and remain considerably warmer than untreated wood. Outdoor structures gain years of extra lifespan. Even wooden garden beds exposed to frost can benefit from a lighter version of the treatment. Some survivalists use the mixture on bow staves, axe handles, or hiking staffs to create weatherproof, grip-friendly surfaces. The brilliance of the medieval cold-repelling treatment is that it didn't require advanced tools or rare ingredients. It relied entirely on materials every homestead already had: fire, wood, animal fat, soot and resin. This made the technique accessible to every social class, not just the wealthy. The fact that it still works today is, I think, testament to the observational intelligence of the people who refined it through generations. Their approach wasn't mystical. It was practical science born from necessity. If you value these kinds of forgotten methods and want to keep learning how ancient builders survived climates far harsher than ours, subscribe to In the Beginning, share this guide with other history enthusiasts, and help preserve the knowledge that carried our ancestors through centuries of cold.